Okay, I think we're live. Good. Okay, on air. Sweet. Awesome. Well, YouTube, good evening. This is Triple here again, with some new friends to show you, and we're gonna talk with special guest. But first, I want to just say thank you for watching, and I'll give a quick shout out to we've got Duff, JP. And you guys can give a quick shout out real quick.
What's up? I'm JP.
Hey, everybody.
And we have a very, very, very special guest, one of my favorite YouTubers, of course, Roaming Millennial. Roaming, say hi.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys.
Awesome, thanks for joining us. And I'm just gonna give, if you guys have been living under a rock for the past however long and you don't know about Roaming, she is a YouTuber making several different kind of videos, political and not, kind of going through and hopefully making more fun of SJWs kind of thing. And she's gonna be here talking with us about various topics. And she has amazing videos, and she just released actually one with an awesome interviewer, or had an interview with Mr. Shapiro. Roaming, anything you want to add to that I might have missed, or?
Yeah, that's a pretty good description. I make social and political commentary videos. It's sort of hard to describe someone's political views, but I sort of identify as a conservatarian. And yeah, if you haven't seen my videos, I'd appreciate it if you check it out.
Great. And just a few quick, semi-fun questions for Roaming real quick. Since, and I think I recently saw your channel, I think the first video I saw of you was probably a year ago with you talking about, I think it was something with transgenderism. It's been a while, but I was curious for you. One of my first questions for you would be, given everything you know now, do you think that if you weren't on YouTube currently, would you do it, or you'd be like, you know what, it was fun, I'm glad I got started now, but it's scary and terrifying, if that makes sense?
That's a really good question. Well, I think there are definitely some days where I'm like, no, this is, the rage quit temptation is there. As I think, like, any YouTuber has that. But I think overall I've been really, really lucky. And this is something I'm really fortunate to do because, I mean, I studied political science in school. It's something I was passionate about. But I think any political or social science major knows that, it's kind of a joke that you're going to end up being unemployed. And it's a field where it's not very financially beneficial. And you usually have to choose between doing something that's financially sound versus something that you care about. For a lot of people, a lot of professions, that's the way it is. And I'm extremely fortunate that I found a niche where I'm able to, not starve, but at the same time talk about things that I'm passionate about. So I'm really lucky.
Awesome. No, that's great. No, I'm glad you are happy. It sounds to do the videos like to do and kind of thing. And just I guess another kind of follow up to that, on your channel now, when since you've been, I mean, you're kind of, young-ish, I'd say. Is there a point to which you thought, you are now successful, or are you there yet? Do you think you have like way more you want to do, kind of thing, or are you like, I am set, I feel good about the channel thus far, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it's really strange. I mean, I'm still at a point in my life where I'll tell people that I'm a YouTuber and they'll kind of be like, oh, like, are you okay? I mean, I heard they're hiring at such and such place. And, but, there are other days where, I just interviewed Ben Shapiro. I've interviewed Milo. I've got to speak at university. So it's kind of all over the place. And I don't know if there's ever going to be a point where I can say like, yeah, I did it. I am successful. But I think overall, I'm really happy with the way things are going, and I'm excited to see where I'm at, in a year from now, 2 years from now. If there was a moment where I would be able to say like, okay, here I am successful, it would be when I met Ben Shapiro in person and he serenaded me and Michael Knowles on the violin. I think that would be the quintessential point.
Pinnacle
I
of
saw the drawing somebody made of that.
Right, I saw that. That was some talented people out there who choose to draw the strangest things, in my opinion.
Awesome. Okay, then this is probably this last follow-up now. That question I just for a new one. And so you said you mentioned the college tours and things, and so I saw your talk at Lafayette. I guess in that situation, were you? I mean, I would if it were with me, I'd definitely be terrified to be there. But I guess how intimidated / worried / holy crap, where am I, kind of like, what was the, I guess, vibe, and how did you, like, were you defensive? I mean, I assume you were. Like, how was all that going on, like, when you were there?
Yeah, so it was strange. It wasn't the first time I'd spoken at a university. I spoke earlier was this April? Yeah, it was this April at University of Texas at El Paso, and that was a It was a bipartisan event called Bridge the Divide. It was hosted by the College Republicans, but we had someone from the Young Turks there. We had leftists, and it was kind of a mix of people. And honestly, that was really low-key event. Everyone was really calm. There was a pretty small crowd, but it was a really fun, great experience. And so, going into this, when I heard it was at Lafayette, which is a smaller school, and I heard that the conversation would be surrounding Trump's election, which honestly, I was even surprised that they chose that, because that happened at the time almost 9 months, or no, more than that. It was almost a year ago. I wasn't really expecting much pushback. I thought, it'll be a fun conversation to have, but that was pretty much it. The day I got to, I flew into the Newark airport. The professor and one of the students who was hosting the event, they kind of told me what the general vibe at the university or at the college was, that people had been tearing down posters, that they had tried to plan a protest, that there were opposition actions planned, and how upset people were. That really took me back. I was so surprised. I wasn't expecting that, especially I don't consider myself a controversial person. So to hear that was all happening just because I was speaking somewhere, that was like, what's that can't be. And then when we actually got to the venue to see, I guess just all the hostility and how upset and emotional people were, it was something that really took me back. I'd never been in a situation like that. We've all seen the, I guess, footage from Berkeley when people like Milo and Ben show up. And I always thought that was sort of an extreme case, that most university students wouldn't be like that. And it was only because these were people like Milo, this extreme provocateur. I had no idea that, at your everyday small liberal arts college, just talking about supporting Trump would elicit that kind of reaction. I was really shocked.
No, the whole thing was crazy. But hey, you seem to do, have a good defense, and you're here now, so you.
It's a long day. I had a headache by the end of it.
I can imagine that. That sounds crazy. Okay. Anyway, so thank you, Roaming. That's awesome. Great intro. Okay, guys, don't worry, I haven't forgot about you. Now we'll get to the open the floor up, and like I said, I'm gonna do a quick spiel. You guys will talk. We'll give it to Roaming. But first topic that I wanted to go over right now, and this is, I honestly don't know much about it. I heard it a little bit last night, but I guess apparently in the news now, Twitter is doing blue checkmark things. I honestly, I don't know a whole lot about the story, but I guess they're trying to go and verify people, and I think personally it's crazy, and they're a private company, so I guess whatever you can want to do, maybe it'll change things. But I guess Duff and then JP, what do you guys think about the whole situation?
Actually, I'd bounce that over to JP. This isn't something I'd heard about. So is Twitter actively engaging in getting rid of people's blue dots? Is that what's been happening?
I can put a little context around it. And anybody who knows better, Roaming, you might, since, well, you never had a blue check, but now you may never have a blue check.
No, I've been applying for months. They keep rejecting me.
Good luck now. But to my understanding, what's going on is Twitter people, or people on Twitter, were complaining that right-wingers and even people like Richard Spencer have a blue check, not realizing that the blue check only ever meant that you are who you say you are. So if somebody makes a fake account or a parody account and they try speaking as you, if they don't have that blue check, you shouldn't trust it, right? But now they're removing blue checks from like Richard Spencer, some people who aren't even as far right as he is. And I think the official statement was something along the lines of they're basically using it as a form of endorsement. Well, it's being seen as a form of endorsement, so now they're removing it if you don't follow the behaviors that Twitter says you should follow. And I don't know, I think that's kind of crazy. I personally wish they would keep the blue check as it is and maybe add a new graphic as like a Twitter, like a top star Twitter person, like, hey, this is an example of how to behave on Twitter. And, somebody like Roaming, I would expect to actually get both graphics. Richard Spencer may not get that second graphic. That would be okay.
Yeah, well, I know how I learned about this was that I saw Laura Loomer was tweeting that she had her blue check mark removed. So after chuckling about that for myself, I kind of looked into it, and she was talking about things like censorship, free speech. And yeah, you're right. So originally the blue check was just hey, this person is the person they're claiming to be. So it's relevant if you're a public figure, someone like a singer, actor, whatever, so that people can't pretend to be you on social media. But people like, I think it was like Laura Loomer, Richard Spencer, and I think Wife with a Purpose have gotten their blue check marks removed now. And the official reason that Twitter is using is that they've violated certain parts of terms of service attached to the blue verification thing. But I mean, essentially, I think it's pretty safe to say that this is politically motivated, especially, I mean, they can claim that people like Richard Spencer broke hate speech regulations or whatever, and that's why the blue check was removed. But people like Tariq Nasheed, who say way worse things in my opinion, or at least just as bad, are still verified. So it really doesn't make sense there. I
mean, Donald Trump might even, like, what if they remove his blue check? Is that ever going to happen? He said something crazy.
I think that might be the impetus of a world civil war if that ever happens.
Oh my.
Well, just to follow up with that, you have to wonder what it was that Twitter initially thought it was providing its users with by making the blue check. Because the assumption that someone can fake who you are is scary. In fact, on I think it's Minds.com or one of the other competitors, there's actually a fellow who has taken over several people's handles, and essentially you would have to buy them back from him. He claims to be a bit of a benevolent white hatter, as it were, but he actually has one of yours there, Roaming.
Yeah, someone has contacted me about that, or maybe it was the man himself. I'm not sure, but yeah.
And you would assume that the blue check is a way of preventing that kind of, I guess it's white fraud, because they're not demanding money, except for his little thing says he would like to have the ownership still. He'll let you use it, but he just wants to think he's being a good guy for letting you use the thing, because he's better than other people who could grab a hold of it. And that's sketchy, even to begin with. Have you read his sort of manifesto there, Roaming?
I did at one point, but I'm not really on Minds, so I've just left it alone. But I know I have had people reach out to me about it. At the time I was considering reaching out to people on Minds and asking them if they did have a verification system or anything like that, because I know I have had people, some of these alternate platforms, reach out to me and say that, hey, if you join our whatever, we will give you a verified account. But again, like, since I'm not on Minds, I never ended up doing it.
Yeah, and along with that, the thing which Twitter is doing now would seem to be, you can't get away from the fact it's politically motivated, as you pointed to, because all they're essentially doing is, yes, we phoned this person, yes, we emailed this person, they said we are who we are, and we believe that it's credible enough to say that that's true. So is it that there's far too many people, if we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt, applying now to say I am X or Y person, and they can't really identify it all that accurately without months and months of checking? Or is it simply now just political shorthand to say, we think that the internet community has turned the blue check into an endorsement of positions that we don't agree with, ergo, we're going to start pulling them from people that we really don't agree with?
Well, I know a while before this happened, and this was maybe about a week or two ago, it wasn't long ago, I saw that some protesters outside, I think it was Twitter's headquarters, put up something along the lines of Twitter verifies Nazis or something like that, or Twitter endorses Nazis. And I saw that, and I remembered thinking to myself, like, wait a second, I mean, you know, don't think of me as someone who's going to start standing up for Twitter, but at the same time, they're not endorsing Nazis. It's simply, hey, this public figure is indeed who they claim to be. And I didn't end up commenting on it, but I wish I would have. And I think that narrative became popular enough that Twitter actually is now thinking like, oh crap, we don't want to be seen as endorsing these people, even if it's something as simple as a blue check. Because, you know, the whole idea that, oh, maybe it's getting harder to verify who's people, the identity of people, that would make a lot more sense if they weren't actively removing blue checks, right? It's one thing to never give them out, but they're actually taking it away from people who have had it in the past for a long time, which doesn't make sense to me.
And they're taking it away knowing that that's the verified account of, like, Richard Spencer. So it really doesn't make any sense. If anything, like, you would almost imagine they'd want to tag people like Richard Spencer. I think in a way it could be chaotic if you, me, Duff, Triple could all go on Twitter and pretend to be Richard Spencer. That sounds worse.
We're not gonna go down. Well, that was my last video about roaming. That's crazy. But no, that's ridiculous. I know. I'm glad you, JP. Thank you for giving more detail on that. I didn't know it was to that extent. But just real quick to switch over a little bit more, and then thank you guys. That was awesome. I'm glad I know more about that now. Another thing I wanted to mention here was, of course, I imagine everyone or most people know about all the Hollywood dumpster fire, as Mr. Shapiro says, that's going on right now, and all the allegations and just the craziness there. And so I just wanted to throw out the topic of does any or how do we feel about Hollywood being exposed? Do you think this is going to change the industry, change how things are going to be done in the future, or do we think that's going to be how it's been for years and people just kind of go, oh, that's how it is, and kind of ignore it? I mean, I would hope that things change, but if history has any indication, then if there's a change, it's going to be slow unless something massive happens, which, I mean, I don't know. I feel like this is going to be a slight change, if anything else, but I mean, I can't see anything being too immediate, which is unfortunate. But yeah, Duff, go ahead. Any thoughts on that?
I can't really say anything too new. As on Rover Time, we spent a good 5 episodes sort of picking this apart. And I think what we essentially came down to is if you're going to create an environment where people with skill are competing with one another, the problem becomes everybody is skillful, ergo you need to bring something else to the table. And sadly, that something else has been sexual favors. And we never really figured out how to get around this, because essentially, if you could look at actresses or actors and go, why did this person get picked for the role as opposed to this person who is also a fantastic actor? With the knowledge we now have, it becomes really, really hard to say it's not a sexual favor which has been traded at some point. So is it that we have to go and look at the process itself and say, hey, we need to make sure that we actually have effective standards which you can hold your casting agent to say this person's a better actor than that person, as opposed to, oh, we need to pick this person, and someone goes, why? And you go, well, reasons. So it's a really tragic thing. And I don't know if we'll be able to tease it out that quickly, but JP or Roaming, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I agree with you a lot for this. You always heard stories about the whole casting couch thing and what some people have to do to get roles in Hollywood. I personally always thought those were exaggerated stories. They're just like, yeah, sure, because my background before I got into YouTube, I was actually working in HR and stuff like that. Corporations that have very strict guidelines about sexual harassment and stuff. So I always assumed that Hollywood, multi-billion-dollar industry, there would be standards for this kind of thing. And I guess when these allegations started coming out, I think it started with Harvey Weinstein, I just didn't realize how prevalent it was. And it seems like every other week there's a new story, or, even more often than that, there's a new story. So I think it's enough now where we can say that yes, there is a pattern. And what I think needs to happen is, we talk about draining the swamp a lot when it comes to politicians. I think we need to start doing that with the people who are in charge of the entertainment industry. I think for too long it's been monopolized, and the people who are at the top have had so much power over other people's careers. But you know what? Media is changing, and independent and digital media, it's getting bigger and bigger. So hopefully when we see things like independent movies become more successful, when people are able to make their own projects available to viewers on a massive scale, hopefully the people who are doing these things and who are using coercive tactics to get people to do what they want, they won't have as much power. Because I would love to say like, oh no, these people will just change for the better. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we're just going to need to, I guess, declaw them so they're not effective at being predators.
Yeah, it's good point. Anything to add, JP?
No, I think that was all well said.
The only thing I would jump in and add, and this is cynical, but the other problem is environments breed the people who can succeed in them. So when we talk about, on the one hand, the agent is exploiting the person, the casting director is exploiting the person, what this does is train people to take advantage of the exploitation. And so you have a skill set now amongst some actors and potentially some actresses where they know exactly what they need to do going into a casting session with a particular producer, and therefore they increase the likelihood of their job, getting the job. And this is where I think we're really at the tip of the iceberg of what's going on, because it still doesn't benefit the people who have mastered the system to come out and speak against it. In fact, the ones who have mastered it will probably hide even more, because imagine coming out and saying, I have never honestly won an acting position in my life. And imagine if that person comes out and it turns out to be a big name actor and actress who has had a reputation of being extremely wooden and extremely one tone. throughout their entire acting career. So I think we're on the fringes of this thing still, because I would argue that it's not draining the swamp because there's only ever been the swamp. It's creating something new.
Right, and I think what we're seeing with some of the female actresses who are coming out and defending some of these people against allegations. I mean, look, I'm sure none of us are trying to take away anyone's presumption of innocence, but when someone like Lindsay Lohan comes out in Harvey Weinstein's defense and is trying to deflect all of this blame, and when Lena Dunham, I think, essentially calls someone making an accusation a liar against one of her, what is it, producers or something like that, even though she's part of the listen and believe camp, it kind of makes you wonder, like, I think, like you said, perhaps there are some actresses who, even though they're female and you would think the victims in this, perhaps have an interest in preserving the system because it has benefited them.
Yeah, that's that's crazy. That's wow. That's a good, very cynical observation there, Duff.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. And actually, that leads me to the next part, because I know this topic's been talked about a ton, so I want to mention that. But from what you, Roaming and Duff have said, that was kind of leads to my next question for you guys: the draining the swamp and everything. I was curious what you guys thought of. Of course, you know, there's Roy Moore's being talked about and debated with his sexual allegations and what have you, and with all that going on, what's everyone's thoughts on the upcoming election? Do you think the Republicans will keep the majority? And if so, is that actually a good thing for Trump, or maybe they lose it and maybe he's impeached? I guess what's the thought there? Because I think that's the whole. I mean, I think that I kind of hope they keep it, but I mean they've done not a whole lot this past year, so I mean, I kind of would be curious. Maybe they need to kick in the pants, but I mean, I don't know. Duff, JP, any thoughts there?
I have one quick thought. I think that when it comes to like the Al Franken thing, the Roy Moore thing, there are people on all sides of the debate that are really confused about, you know, what's more severe than other things. You know what I mean? All of it's not justifiable, but you'll see people defend one politician, but then completely hammer the other guy. And arguably one is worse, or even if they're exactly the same, or they're both just completely unreasonable, the stances that people are taking seem to come with a lot of, there's a lot of double standard. And I do think that it's because of the elections and because they're politicians that it's confusing the conversation, which worries me because I feel like right now is when the conversation's happening, but it doesn't seem like it will be happened until after the election. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like the emotions around it and people worrying about who's going to have the seat in the Senate and all of that are kind of clouding their ability to discuss this.
Yeah. Duff?
Well, actually, I'd turn this over to Roaming. I'll brief aside. I always find it interesting being on podcasts like these because I'm from Canada, and so people will throw things at me. And it's like, yeah, I've read about them, but I'm not a political pundit. But someone like Roaming, who's actually got her ear to the floor, I'd actually appreciate hearing her take on it.
Yeah, no, let's go.
Well, I was on the Michael Knowles show when some of this was unraveling with Moore, and I think it was the second allegation with Gloria Allred was just coming to light, and now, of course, there's been more evidence coming forward. And I think, Jake, you're exactly right. There are some people who are so keen to win that election, regardless of how they may feel personally about Moore and the allegations against him. There are a lot of people who are saying, you know what? Doesn't matter. I'm electing him into office to fulfill a political role with government. I'm not saying he's a great guy. Even if he's a scumbag, he'll still do this role better than a Democrat. And there are a lot of people who are willing to say, I don't care about his personal life. Just please not someone who's going to just do something like, I don't know, raise my taxes or something. That's a pretty common sentiment, I think, among a lot of voters. As far as I know, from what I remember, and anyone can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Moore was in the lead, then these things started coming out, then he slipped back. I think in a cynical way, I would like to believe that, or I guess the cynic in me wants to believes that people don't really care about the personal lives of their politicians. They just kind of want their team to win. But I mean, I'm not from Alabama, but I know I personally would have a very hard time voting for someone like Roy Moore, even if he isn't, technically found guilty in a court of law, just based on the mounting evidence that's coming out against him. And I think Republicans, they're not doing good. And it's too bad because the Democrats are doing even worse right now. And the only thing stopping Republicans from, I think, keeping the majorities in Congress is the fact that they're handling everything that they do so badly. I mean, if you take someone like Roy Moore, if you actually care about the Republican Party and conservatism as a movement, if you are Roy Moore or anyone attached to his campaign, I think at this point you should know to step down, because you staying in the race reflects badly on Republicans, whether or not the allegations are true, right? I think how the Democrats' failure to condemn someone like Bill Clinton speaks poorly on their behalf. I think the same can be said for Republicans if people continue to support Roy Moore, because I mean, we already have the I guess public image of being rapey, so this doesn't help. This doesn't help.
Yeah, and that's actually where I jump into this conversation, because politicians in general, particularly in the US, benefit and suffer from the mythology of sort of the manifest destiny of you got that position because potentially God put you there, because the tide of the times put you there. And it allows them, when they get called out on things, to basically say, oh, but you voted for me then, why not vote for me now? And if you don't vote for me now, you're against conservatism, you're against the Democratic Party, you're against this. And it's like, well, not really. Only if you frame the question as an absolute. As a politician, your one job is to appeal to your voter in such a way that they will cast a ballot for you. That doesn't actually give you any ownership over your individual voters, even though you would like to claim it. And I think this is where it gets to their heads, because they feel that the voters are actually an extension of their political will and their their inherent destiny as a politician, to say like, well, I'm here because X, Y put me here, and therefore, even though I did a bad thing, you have to realize that the inertia of my own campaign should keep me here, even if I do terrible things. Bill Clinton was very much guilty of making arguments like this, and so is Roy Moore, where it's saying, I am destined to be here. You guys are now the problem for calling me out. And then he throws religion, faith, and all this other stuff under the bus, when really it should come down to, am I representing my constituents well? And if they expect me to provide an example to live by, am I doing that? If I'm not, I should probably step down.
Right. And I think all politicians kind of have the issue where I think you have to, at least on some level, be a little bit of a narcissist, a little bit power hungry to run for public office on such a large scale. And I think there are a lot of people, I think Roy Moore is definitely one of these people by this point, who are running not necessarily for the GOP, conservatism in general, but rather just because they want that job. They think they're the best person for it, rather than thinking strategically, okay, if I stay here, it's going to look bad for the party. People aren't going to vote Republicans in the future, but that kind of thing. And I think it's, I don't know if selfish is the right word, but I don't think he's thinking about the election on a larger national scale right now.
Huh, that is totally totally crazy. I guess, and to what you guys both said, do you think that at this rate, if the Republicans do actually keep the majority, is that a good thing? Or maybe that since all this is going down, maybe we're no better off that they are there? Or I guess, is there what is, I guess, maybe the best case scenario, I guess, in your opinion? Either Duff or Roaming.
I would like to see them retain the majority, just because I think, if one house is ruled by Democrats, the other by Republicans, nothing is going to get done. It's just going to be craziness. Of course, that's not so different from what we have now, but I think, best case scenario, Republicans would keep both so that at least we could get some real movement on healthcare. I don't know if that's going to happen though.
My question with this is more, is what we're seeing now an indictment of the illusion that America is a two-party federalist system? Because it would appear more and more that individual parts of the party are acting autonomously from one another, and to lump them all under either Republican or Democrat is no longer descriptive of their particular positions. And so when I look at this, I want to say, as a Canadian, We benefit greatly from the US being south of us. When the economy of the US is doing well, Canada's economy does well too. So from that perspective, keeping the Republicans in power is helpful to me as a Canadian. It keeps the Canadian economy going well. But a wishy-washy government in the States causes all sorts of problems internationally. And even if you have two opposing parties in each house, and one party controls one party controls the other, so long as things can get done, that's a good thing. Right now, what we're seeing is that the Republican Party is not cohesive enough to actually get through a coherent agenda. So in both instances, I would say it's neither a good or a bad thing if they continue to act this way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Actually, not you just made me think of something else. I guess Duffin and Roaming or either or. But since you just mentioned that the cohesiveness is an issue, I've seen a few articles talking about Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan and their, I guess we'll call it lack of leadership. And I mean, I don't know, in your guys' opinion, do you think that they are doing okay, could be doing better, and do you think that they should step down and maybe someone else should take the reins? Is that what should happen maybe?
I don't have as much of a gripe with Mitch McConnell as I do with someone like John McCain. I think he needs to step down. I think Lindsey Graham needs to step down. Paul Ryan, I think he's probably all right as just your average, rank and file Republican in the House. I think he's not been effective as Speaker. I think he a fair place for him is chairman of the House Budget Committee. He's good with numbers, but I don't think he has the pull among Republicans to actually get things done. And actually, Paul Nealon, I think, is the challenger that he has in Wisconsin, or at least one of them. And I follow him on Twitter. You should check him out. He's great. He actually presents, I think, a much more libertarian, almost Tea Party oriented version of the Republican Party and conservatism. So I'm hoping that the people of the 1st District of Wisconsin, when elections come around again, look more to people like him than Ryan, because I think he's been disappointing lately.
JP, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm honestly not as informed as you guys. I care more about this stuff from like a psychological level. That's why if you heard my statement, I'm more worried about the fact that people aren't discussing the issues honestly because of the politics than I am about the politics.
Can I throw something out there with that? So Stefan Molyneux, Canadian philosopher, he recently released a book called The Art of the Argument,
Yes.
Western Civilization, and I forget what the last part of that title is, but that's his primary thesis, is when Western civilization is working at its best, it's having a continuous argument with itself. And the argument is important, because if the argument breaks down, that leads to violence. And what we have right now is a lot of people claiming that they're trying to engage in an argument, but then poisoning the well immediately. Where they'll go like, well, if only they sat down at the table, those racist bigots. And it's like, wait a second, you want to sit down at the table with racist bigots? It's like, well, no, I shouldn't. So they're giving themselves an out for not actually having to deal with people. And what's weird is John McCain has been calling for more bipartisan support, but even he is guilty of this, where it's like, basically, we want to do something, but I can't actually do anything with these people because they won't argue or they won't talk with us. So it becomes a really self-defeating system, but it's a self-defeating system that feeds into the sophistry of popular media and the aggrandizement of the personal cult. And that's what a lot of politicians and a lot of social figures seem to be more interested in now, is generating their own personal following, building their own brand, and letting everything else burn down around them. And so just to jump back to Stefan Molyneux's book, he would argue that right now, this is what is causing our society to fail, is we have forgotten the importance of the argument and why it's important to engage in it. But what are your thoughts on that there, guys?
Go for it, Roaming.
Well, I think what you said about how they're more interested in their own branding rather than the actual issues, I think that's completely true. I mean, of the Republican leadership, people are really just concerned with staying in power. I mean, whether it's someone like John McCain, Mitch McConnell, or Paul Ryan, or even someone like Nancy Pelosi, I think they're concerned about winning re-election, not so much getting getting this bill or something passed through. And like, even if we look at something like tax reform, I think there are a lot of people who would rather go to their constituency and say, yeah, see that awful bill? I didn't vote for it. I'm sticking with what you guys want, rather than actually try to get things done. You know, they would rather save face and come out looking positive than actually pass something that would be good for their constituency in the long run. And I think that's a lot of the reason why we've had so much stalemate and gridlock lately.
Huh, that's no good point. Any additional thoughts there, JP?
Nope.
That's awesome. Good job. No, that's pretty great. And to your point there, Duff, do you think since that is the, I guess, issue, so I guess is the solution as easy as debate more, or is that fair?
I think the solution and sort of the thing which Stefan Molyneux outlines is that we need to get back to what the debate actually is. And the best way potentially to do that is to try and readjust what we expect out of our politicians. He frames it in terms of sophistry versus actual philosophy. The sophist makes very grand claims and will claim to be the hero and like to stand there with his sword unsheathed and shield raised, but isn't actually fighting anyone or anything. Whereas the philosopher is not actually saying, I have a solution. They're saying, what is the nature of the problem? And that's a policy thing. And Roaming can tell you firsthand that whenever she tries to make a policy video, nobody watches it. Yeah. And that's our problem in society. We actually don't care about the mechanics. And if we don't care about the mechanics, people can get away with anything they please.
And I think we see that a lot, especially in election cycles. If you look at this past presidential election, when it came to any subject, whether it was taxes, immigration, healthcare, they don't talk. Politicians don't talk about policy and the mechanics, like you said, behind it. It's all about, when I was driving through North Dakota, I met a single mother who, and this personal anecdote, because unfortunately, as a society, we're just not interested in the nitty-gritty behind the functions of government or these kinds of issues. We'd rather just, I guess, engage on things in a rhetorical level, an emotional level, in a personal level than anything that's, I guess, too taxing, like actually focusing on policy or numbers, which is too bad.
Yeah, and I have one thing to say. Hopefully it's not incredibly true, but it's an observation of mine. I do find that a lot of the people who are interested in the mechanics aren't really trying to see how the world is and kind of use it to our advantage. They're almost using mechanics to socially engineer how the world should be to them. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is like your very far left progressive who, is convinced that there's an infinite number of genders, identity doesn't really matter, none of this stuff is useful in a social environment. And what I think they're doing is, like, just to counter what you said a little bit about not caring about the mechanics of it, is that they are actually trying to rebuild the mechanics of it. They want to create a world that half of us do not want. And that's kind of scary because, like you said, the other half of the world, they're just not even thinking about the mechanics. So,
yeah, no, for sure, that JP. And it's funny because you're just like, to push back on that. Essentially, it comes down to, can you live with the idea that you're not always right and that there are positions that are not relative? And so when you can bring arguments down to the idea that there is some sort of objective reality that you're getting at and it doesn't need to be manufactured, then a lot of the outrage machine loses its sting. And they don't want that because the mechanical infrastructure they want in place is one that they can continuously tune to get what they would like out of it. To throw out a Game of Thrones quote there, I think Jon Snow quotes his dad, and he goes, "One thing I learned from Ned was that if you have two parties negotiating, the best type of result is when nobody's happy, but everybody can live with it." And the problem here is that nobody's happy, and they're not willing to live with it. And that slight difference in phrasing leads to all sorts of ambiguity over things which really could be settled between people if they just sat down and talked.
And I think a lot of us, And this is, I think, gotten worse with online culture. We see compromise as a dirty thing. We have to be ultimately right, whether it's a social issue or a policy issue. And we're not willing to compromise. And there's this, I think, tendency among a lot of people to look at your opponent not only as being wrong or incorrect or misguided, but being, I guess, morally bankrupt, which is a dangerous thing to have.
Well, just last thing on that, I always find it hilarious because, of course, I help out with the Overtime podcast, and I really enjoy those guys. But if they were to ask me my political affiliation, I have a feeling I'd lose some friends, because it's like, I'm a Canadian and I'm a Canadian centrist. That puts me further left than the Democratic Party in the States.
Yeah.
and it's like, wow. But at the same time, as someone who's a centrist in Canada, I can say I appreciate gun rights. I appreciate things done well. I appreciate the government when it's working at its best on the lowest possible budget, but giving us the counterbalance to corporatism that we need. But at the same time, I'm not willing to argue for the unrestricted free market, because I've never seen it in existence. I've never seen it historically. But with that being said, I've never seen a completely controlled market historically that works either. So it's like, I want to be happy in the middle with all the chaos that breeds. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that there, guys?
Lots to unpack there. Yeah, that's I mean, I think that's definitely a good point to make about how like you guys were saying, the mechanics of things and everything else. But I mean, I don't know, it's all, I mean, gone really crazy thus far, and I feel like the only real way, like you and Roman were saying, was, I mean, the only way to get people to care, if you will, I mean, not to say, oh, hey, I'm gonna go and I'll fight for you, or I'll do XYZ. I mean, I don't think that, I saw a poll recently about how I think it was only 20 or 30% of millennials or some certain generation don't know either all three branches of government, or they don't know, or they do, but they don't know how they work. And so I guess, I mean, there's why we are at this crazy position of not getting things done, or not caring, or, oh, hey, you know, they said something really cool and they said they'd help me out, so we don't have to go back anything up. So I mean, I think the best solution we have to do now is, I mean, are just teaching people the right thing to do, and that is actually what sounds like is most in jeopardy, or, I mean, is failing, has failed, whatever, you know, the best way to fix that is to, I don't know, I guess I've always heard a bunch of the commercials for Hillsdale, so make more of those around the country and that kind of thing. But I don't know, is that JP, anyone else, is that the do you think education, is that the best answer maybe?
I think a specific kind of education needs to be put in place, because it's really frustrating for me to look at my fellow millennials, because on the one hand, we're very energetic, passionate for change. We have a lot of energy toward these issues, a lot of feelings. We want to get things done, right? We have these sort of revolutionary attitude of youth, but at the same time, we also have the short-sightedness and general ignorance of youth. And those things together is what creates movements like Antifa. So I think if there was more of an education around these issues, and I'm not talking about academia, but I'm talking about general inquiry and a search for knowledge and wisdom, I think our generation, and, you know, Gen Z as well, even some of the Gen Xers, we could really affect change. But right now, it's just so much easier to yell and complain and protest than it is to actually look into these issues. So I'm not sure how optimistic I am.
I had two things, and one was, I remember hearing that stat a long time ago, or, you know, the notion that a lot of people in our country didn't even know the difference between the three, you know, judicial, legislative, executive branches, things like that. And I remember thinking, well, who cares? Most people aren't involved in politics. That's not true today. I feel like everybody, even though if they know nothing, feels like they are involved in politics, and in many ways they are, because they're participating in these big movements that are actually, you know, deciding who gets to be voted into office, ruining people's careers, things like that. So that was just the first thing. The second thing, if I can recollect my train of thought, what was the last point you made, Roaming?
About it being easier to yell than learn, I guess.
Education stuff. Yeah. I find myself watching the Oxford Union debates a lot. And I don't know if you guys all watch those, but they're professional debaters, and they might not even hold the position that they're arguing for, but they have to give it its best argument. And it's so fun to watch these things. But this is only something that happens in the UK. Like, I don't know of a single, at least something that's prestigious at a nationwide level in the United States. And I feel like that says a lot about our culture, where we don't even, like, kind of what Duff was saying earlier about Molyneux's book, like, we don't even appreciate the argument anymore. But if you go to places like the UK, where, of course, they have their own problems, at least they still have organized debate, you know? And I feel like that's just another way to kind of educate people. Because if you have representatives of either side of an argument, for or against a stance, really giving its, I think it was it Sam Harris who coined the Iron Man term, as opposed to straw man?
Steel man.
Huh?
Steel man.
Steel man. Okay. So really give it its steel man argument. I think a lot of people would be silly to pretend that their view is just, you know, the obviously correct view, right? That's it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Any additional thoughts there, Duff?
Well, I think the trick is very much to do with the fact that the internet has created a world which we still don't understand well. And it boils down to the fact that you can only have a conversation generally between 2 people, 3 people at most. And so when you literally have thousands of people going at one another, there isn't a conversation. There's just a cacophony of ideas, none of which you can really grab hold of. And when it comes to things like education, you know, forever people have been saying that the next generation isn't educated enough. My favorite sort of aside on this is there's an ancient Babylonian tablet that they found. They translated it, and it was literally a guy lamenting that people in ancient Babylon don't remember their history. So it's something which is actually endemic to humanity, which is at one point reassuring and at the other point terrifying, because we don't seem to be able to get a hold of the things which cause chaos within our own society. And the more people that are engaged in the discourse without actually being in discussion just increases that chaos exponentially. So, it leads to an odd formation of groups. Now, I'm sorry to sort of pull YouTube drama into this conversation, but a good example of this would actually be Lauren Southern's discussion, which she tried to have a couple weeks ago, where everyone was supposedly within touching distance of one another in terms of their beliefs, but they couldn't talk to one another, essentially because they were more interested in yelling each other down. And I think that's a good illustration of that sort of chaos versus conversation dichotomy. But what are your thoughts there, guys?
Roaming, anything?
Well, yeah, definitely. And I think that stream was a good illustration of internet culture for several reasons. I think it kind of went to show how, in some ways, unproductive it can be, right? I mean, if you have this giant conversation of pretty much every issue out there, are you really gonna settle things on a macro level, or even on a micro level? I don't think so. Things become a lot harder. And second, if you look at how the overall discourse unravels, you know, I'm someone who, when I have people on my channel, I kind of have I didn't have this rule before, but I've over the months kind of realized how important it is to have this rule where unless someone is actually interested in not only speaking with me, but listening to me and what you're saying, it's not really a productive conversation. It's more just a shouting match of who can spout your own opinions at the other person more quickly, right? But it's not an argument if you're just saying what you believe, but not addressing the other person's thoughts, feelings, arguments, whatever. And I think something that I dealt with after that Lauren Southern stream was that because of the nature of the debate, conversation, public discourse, whatever you want to call it nowadays, we also have the guilty by association fallacy is now stronger than it ever has been, especially when this kind of goes into how specifically YouTube and political commentary in the age of the internet functions. But, you know, we can't agree with someone about one thing without agreeing with them about everything, right? I mean, we can't speak out against one issue and then not another issue, or else we're a hypocrite. And do we really agree with or disagree with any of those issues, right? I mean, the whole way of how we can present our arguments or present ourselves as political actors, I think, has really changed.
Wow, wow. JP?
I'll go on record saying that any of your critics, Roaming, that think you should have handled your interview with Richard Spencer any differently, I think they have it wrong. I think they're contributing to the chaos that we're talking about. You were right to speak to him like a human being, and at the end you still seem to like mostly disagree with him, and for some reason people can't seem to understand how you can disagree with a guy and still talk to him like just another human. So.
Yeah, well, I think with that, and I've thought about that a lot, and we can move on if you want, but I think the reason why it worries people so much when you not only when you disagree with someone but refuse to demonize them is because it humanizes them. And I think it's a much more effective political tactic to convey the idea that not only is your opponent wrong, but they are an awful, awful person. But when you actually sit down and talk with someone in a way that exposes the thinking behind their ideas, whether it's wrong or right, but kind of paints them in a way that, oh yeah, they are just a regular human with concerns, valid or not, it doesn't really matter, but just the fact that they are kind of like every other person and not literally Hitler incarnate, I think is worrying to some people because it chips away at the narrative that they've built up of that person in their head.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback a second thing which Stephen Molyneux says in his book, and what he says is that rationality is a learned behavior for the human condition, and it's one that has to be learned well in order to extend it to other people and extend, let's say, grace, the ability to listen, the ability not to give into your emotions, which tend to put things as either it's a prey, it's a predator, it's out to get you, you have to go and get it. And so bringing that rationality into the discourse and bringing mutual respect that is not underhanded in any sort of way is something that's hard to learn and even harder to put into practice. And it's like, an example would be, there really is only one Dave Rubin. There really is only one Roaming Millennial. There really is only one Ben Shapiro. And what sets them apart is that they're willing to listen even if they disagree. And I would put Steven Crowder and a bunch of others into that same category. But you can tell that in some situations, they're having to work hard to maintain that rational stance, whereas others would jump onto the quick and easy payoff of shouting someone down. And that's where like network news and things like this has really lost its way, and where long-form content on the internet has, I would say, allowed people to get a greater understanding of what a discourse looks like, as well as what a debate looks like. So there are some flecks of gold in this quagmire that is the internet.
I know you say there's only one Dave Rubin, but after his 1 month hiatus, if Star Trek taught me anything, that's an evil twin. Beard now.
I like the beard. I think he pulls it off.
No, I actually do like the beard. I just want to make a joke.
I felt so bad for Dave last week, just because of the mediation that he tried to facilitate. Kind of like it was bad. The amount of content Dave does, every once in a while you're going to get a lemon. But what really hurt it for me is the next 2 interviews, actually 3 interviews he did, were gold. The re-interview of Gava, his sit down with Stefan Molyneux. And
I really liked that with Stefan. I thought it was great, especially I loved seeing Dave kind of push him about his interest toward race and IQ, why he thinks it's so important to talk about a lot. I thought that was great.
Yeah. And then who was the guy who was from the something scholarship fund for African Americans? That was also a fabulous debate. And just to throw another thing out there, Dave Rubin has got Thomas Sowell coming on in December. That is amazing.
I know, I saw that, and apparently he did have to. I've been trying forever, but he apparently did have to put a lot of work into it and try to finagle that. So I admire his, I guess, his perseverance, and I'm very, very jealous.
Well, he's actually
Roman,
going
just
to take a studio.
Fine. Just offer him food. I'm sure you'll get him.
I'll just ask Dave for his personal contact information and then just kind of cyber stalk him a little bit. He'll just say yes. I'll get him.
That might be the wrong way to go about it. Dave may be having to physically go there and set
You're
up
the
the
only
studio
one.
for him.
You're the only one that'll pull it off. So.
Yeah, because I heard he doesn't do anything like Skype interviews, which I mean, he's at his age. I'm not. I get it. I get it. So, but props to Dave. Yeah, I'm really excited for that.
Whether that's the intention or not, him not doing Skype interviews, it does make it feel more like a inside the actor studio kind of show. Like it feels really authentic, where I could see all the many ways, technical and otherwise, that Skype interviews can go awfully.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, I'm sorry, this is totally random, but I was watching. What was I watching with GadSat? I think I might have been watching some of the old interviews Ruben's done, and he actually lives really close to me. He's a professor at Concordia, so he's actually someone who I could feasibly take my stuff to and set up with him. So I've been thinking about that the past few days. So I might be reaching out to him because it'd be really cool to do an in-person interview.
Roaming, would you like me to message Gad about that? I'm on his Patreon.
Yeah, if you don't mind. I think that would be really cool. And like I'm in the area. I'm going to be getting new cameras and new mics soon. Actually, like probably in a few weeks. So I would love to be able to speak with him.
Okay, you just fire me your contact and I'll put that on a post to him.
Oh, great, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, guys, that's great. I want to get one more topic in before we go. You touched on that before a little bit more too. That's why I wanted to wait, because it was very interesting. But the last thing I wanted to mention was, unfortunately, as we've seen this year and even before this year occurred with everything involving Trump and whatnot, it seems as though, and quoting Ben Shapiro, whatever the left touches, it gets it's destroyed. And unfortunately, of course, it's hit football and everything else, all over entertainment. So another topic question I had for you guys is there anything that you think hasn't been, I guess, completely and utterly destroyed? And if so, do you think it ever will be? Or is it everything eventually does get hit and there's just no hope? And I guess, to you, Roaming, first, if you want to just your thoughts.
Well, I think we are seeing more and more that, and I think PJW, Paul Joseph Watson, has talked about this, that the left is starting to eat itself, that even then, this is the regressive / progressive far left agenda. Not everyone who is on the left spectrum, of course, but these social justice warriors, particularly, they're beginning to start to cannibalize their own movements, and I think that perhaps goes to show that, in this postmodernist, almost nihilistic interpretation of the world we live in, nothing is safe. There was this post a while ago that said, straight black men are the white cis het males of black people, or something along the lines of that. And I think the conclusion of this ideology is one where I guess nothing is safe, nothing can withstand the test of time, because there's no value in anything that's traditional or conservative. And we saw this even in what was it, International Women's Day or something like that, about the whole idea that if men could get pregnant, then abortion rights would be everywhere. But wait, men can get pregnant because gender is their ideology. It's just not standing on anything that's concrete. So anything is up for grabs. There's nothing that's gonna be safe.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. Duff, anything?
Actually, JP, I'll let you go first on this one.
I was just gonna say something about the article you just referenced, where if men can get pregnant. I've noticed that, I consider myself kind of a classical liberal, right? Definitely more center than I used to be. I was very far left at one point. And I've noticed, especially even with that article, like the idea that, if men could get pregnant, everybody would be having abortions, it would be okay, shows that they really don't understand the argument that conservatives are making. Like, there is not a single conservative that I know that is like, I want to control what women's bodies do. It's always about life. And I can ask you three right here. If men could get pregnant, would you still be pro-life?
I would be. And, the thing is, I would or would not have been pro-life or pro-choice, regardless of what gender gets pregnant. Like you said, it's not about specific gender rights. It's about, for both sides, the fetus, what it means to be alive in a person. It has nothing to do with one gender or the other.
Yeah. So I noticed this about a lot of the disagreements. It's like, and I notice from the right too, like when you hear them talk about people on the left, they'll say, oh, they just want to have control of everybody's freedoms, right? And it's like, it's not that simple. It's like people on the left are actually trying to, as I said before, social engineer a more efficient way to living, right? Even if they don't realize how that impedes on people's freedoms, that's their motivation, it seems. And when my friends on the left say things like, oh, conservatives just want to be in women's bodies and stuff, I'm like, no, they really just care about life. So I just wonder if, like, I don't know how to accomplish it, but I feel like there's got to be a way. So at least if you're going to argue or scream at the person you disagree with, argue against their actual view, not the straw man of it. I'm not saying anybody here does that, but I'm just seeing a lot of it all over the place.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Jeff?
Yeah. I would bring up something Jordan Peterson said. And he said, in conceiving of perhaps the worst possible thing that the human race as a whole could come to in terms of thinking about itself, it is that the world would be a better place without us. And this seems to have been taking root in the sort of extreme left. And I really dislike that it's always on the two poles, the right and the left. But this idea that if there were just less of us, the world would be a better place. Instead of saying, if we've allowed for the best conditions for us to thrive, the world would be a better place. And there's an inherent pessimism in that the people are arguing for nihilism. Do what you want whenever you want. Don't let anyone question you. Don't let anyone question what you can do with your own body. Don't let people say that what you're doing is wrong, even if they may have had similar experiences. And it's not new. It's not new. It's just that the way it gets packaged now can reach out to people and get them in places where they might not be as strong as they otherwise would. The terrible thing about the internet is it gets you in your room by yourself and you're watching a video and you may not be thinking critically. And you want to be popular, you want to be liked, you want to have your voice in amongst the people who are doing the right thing, standing up for the little guy or the person who questions their gender orientation or things like that. So you are now basing your sense of worth off of trying to ride the bandwagon of what people are saying is good right now. And as Roaming brought up, the tricky part there is it leads to groups that eat themselves really, really quickly, but groups who have been eaten that can no longer speak out because now their allegiance has been pushed onto the next group's orientation. And it leads to a culture of silence and silencing. And I think that's where the problem emerges from. We're dealing with things that we as people need to be in community with others that have different points of view from us in order to actually grapple with. And as we increasingly insulate each other, ourselves in our own echo chambers, we're doing ourselves the disservice of not being as robust in our thinking as we could otherwise be.
Wow, that's a good point. Any last thoughts there, Roaming?
No, I think that's a really good point. And, the whole kind of cannibalistic culture, persecuting members for perceived wrong. I think that's something we see on the left and on the right. I've been the subject of it from both sides. And I think that kind of, I guess it's almost a cult mentality. It actually just goes to, like I was saying, really shut down conversation more so than anything else, right? Because then we become focused on how we are perceived in group membership rather than the actual issues themselves.
Right. Anything to add there real quick, JP?
No, but I do want to point out, Duff, you are incredibly well-spoken.
Yes.
I try. It's hard.
I agree. I like to be as spoken. And you know what? This is going much better than I thought it was going to. So good on you, Duff. Okay. Well, that takes care of all the serious questions. Now, time for some more fun ones. Sorry guys, this is more for Roaming, so you guys can sit back. Roaming, about you now. So yeah, this is the fun questions now for you. The first question I have for you is, of course, you're pretty popular on YouTube and been to several places giving talks and speeches and what have you. Just curious if you were offered any, and this would be any kind of like you would agree on, the bosses and the channel, whatever else, but if someone offered you a TV show kind of sort of deal, would you take that, or you're like, I'm good on YouTube, that's where I want to stay person?
Do you mean actually on TV or like a network sort of thing?
I guess, do you prefer one of the? This was a general. I mean, sure.
Yeah.
I
So
guess.
I'm very internet focused. I actually don't have cable, so I can't really see myself. I mean, I never say never, but my interests aren't really in. I don't want to work for Fox. I don't want to work for CNN or anything like that. I feel like digital and independent media is really what's growing, what's new, what's exciting, where all of the interesting conversations are happening that are too controversial for places like Fox and CNN. So, I have nothing wrong with anything that's, bigger, more involvement and stuff like that. But I guess I don't see myself ever going too much toward the mainstream just because I say a lot of stuff and I don't think they'd want me anyway.
Fair enough. Okay, now, good. I just want to make, of course, that was actually asked the same kind of question to Mr. Shapiro. He hasn't responded back yet, so hopefully on Friday. But so no, and to add on to that, besides Mr. Michael Knowles, we all know you've already seen and had some time with. Anyone famous you can think of right now, living or dead, you'd want to have dinner with?
I would like to have dinner with Ben Shapiro, just because I've been a huge fan of his for a long time, and I got to interview him, which was amazing. But
You did, that was awesome.
Yeah, there's still so much that I would want to ask him. So Ben Shapiro would be amazing. Thomas Sowell would be really great as well. Let's see who else. Someone like Jordan Peterson, I think, would be just really, really interesting. He probably wouldn't manage to eat a lot because he's a little bit long-winded. I'm not sure if there'd be food going in, but I would really enjoy that conversation. And I guess more fun, not so much political answer would also be Bear Grylls. He's just someone who I really like, and he's one of my favorite celebrities. So.
Okay, cool. Off of that, is there any I don't know, singer, movie person? I mean, I guess Bear Grylls kind of, but I don't know. Is anyone like a singer, songwriter, author kind of person you ever consider dinner with, or?
Ooh, that's a hard one. So there are so many singers and actors and stuff like that whose work I admire, but I'm very aware that we may not get along on a personal level. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Green Day and I love Billy Joe Armstrong, but I don't know if he would like me once he found out what I did for a living, which is usually something you have come up at a dinner conversation or anything like that. So I would like to in theory, but I'm just not sure how that would go.
No, that's fair. That's very, very fair. Okay, and this is crazy. This is definitely safe for you. What is your, and if you don't have one, that's okay. But what is your of the tweets you've seen so far? What is your favorite Trump tweet?
That's a hard one. I really like the recent catty backhanded insult against Kim Jong-un. Why would he call me old? I would never call him short and fat, which is an indirect way of calling him short and fat. I thought that was, cattiness to a uppermost tier. That's probably the one that comes to mind right now.
Okay, no, that's that's very awesome. Okay, and this is probably the final fun question. So of course, I've seen your Patreon account recently, and I now know that a new video you're planning to do is going to talk about a SJW music video. So I've also been told that you have in the past done some singing, what have you. So my question to you is, are we going to see that soon, and/or would you be able to demo some singing for us on the channel?
There's probably not going to be any acapella singing, but yeah, actually, so that's what I was going to do tonight is, for anyone who's watching doesn't know, I just reached a Patreon goal where the reward was that I would do a SJW music video. I've been working on some melodies and the music behind some stuff, but actually the next vote that I'm going to put on is what the lyrical content should be, because I'm kind of torn between making it a joke about Trump and the hysteria he's called, but also maybe poking fun about feminism, maybe poking fun about gender identity. There are a couple different ways this parody type song could go, so I'm going to give it up to a vote for the patrons and see what they choose. But I'm hoping to get it out. There's a lot of stuff happening in December that I can't talk about yet, but I'm hoping to get it out as soon as possible. And I really want it to be good, so I'm going to be trying to, unless I know people like Bearing are into music and there are some other YouTubers, so I'm going to try and get people involved. And what I would like to do for this is have the proceeds for it, if we do put it up on iTunes or something, go to a charity, which I think I will probably let the patrons pick, but I'm really excited and nervous about it, but I think it'll be fun.
I think Chris Ray Gunn would be a natural
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people who are actually really genuinely good. I know Rucka Ali is really good as well. So hopefully, at least some of them might be interested in coming on board. And even someone like, Rover Time, Mark Wass is also really good at guitar. He's amazing, and he's got a great voice too. So there's so many people out there that can help this sound better than it would if it were just me.
Fair enough, fair enough. Well, not to endorse myself, but I do, since I heard that I have my first channel, by the way, was a cover song channel. I didn't get very far, so I'm not sure if that means I'm
what do you play or
So I was in band when I was in high school, and in college I played the trumpet. I have a guitar that I'm okay at, and then I have a piano that I play a little bit. This is a little bit random. One of my favorite YouTubers, singing wise, her name's Christina Grimmie, and she convinced me and inspired me to start to play the piano and stuff. And unfortunately, she passed away a little while ago. But she has inspired me to practice that. So if you need someone to join the band, and I'm
that
done.
would be fun. Maybe we can, and I'll talk about this in the post. But maybe we can make this like a patron project or something like that. If we have enough people.
Awesome. So I guess with that, are you more of a? I'm sorry. Do you play instruments yourself? Are you more of the singer? Or you kind of do not either, or?
So I used to be I used to sing quite a bit when I was in university, but since I graduated, I haven't. But growing up, I played flute, violin, piano, and then when I got older, about 14, I started playing the guitar. So I like whenever I write songs, which are usually not very good, but it's usually done on the guitar.
Wow, no, hey, I need you because I need some lessons on the guitar. That's pretty crazy. And is there a specific genre that you play towards, or kind of whatever? Or?
There was a period of my life where I may or may not have been in an all-girl punk band.
Oh my.
Yes, but lately I've been really into acoustic things and finger picking and stuff like that.
No, awesome. That sounds well. I'm impressed, and I'm looking forward to whatever you Patreon group, wherever that sounds great. Anyway, guys, thank you for joining us. It has been over an hour now, and I wanted to continue on that. And Roaming, thank you very much for your time with us, guys. Thank you for joining us. This has been a great hour-ish more to talk about all the things. We will see you next time. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and until then, you guys have a great one, and thanks for watching.